A Jus Cogens norm is a peremptory, or non-derogable, rule of international law that is so fundamental to the international legal order that it cannot be set aside or suspended, even by the express consent of states. The definition of Jus Cogens is provided for in Article 53 of Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. This article provides that a treaty is void if, at the time of its conclusion, it conflicts with a peremptory norm of general international law. For the purposes of the present convention, a peremptory norm of general international law is a norm accepted and recognized by the international community of states as a whole as a norm from which no derogation is permitted, and which can be modified only by a subsequent norm of general international law having the same character. Moreover, Article 64 of Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties declares that if a new peremptory norm of general international law emerges, any existing treaty, which is in conflict with that norm, becomes void and terminates. The concept of Jus Cogens, of fundamental and entrenched rules of international law, is well established in doctrine now, but controversial as to content and method of creation. Generally, Jus Cogens take the form of rules of customary international law. Their distinguishing and defining feature is that they are universally recognized as so fundamental to the fabric of the international legal system that states may not, even by mutual consent, modify or derogate from their application. They thus represent a body of higher law, binding upon all states notwithstanding agreements to the contrary. By definition, therefore, a treaty that purports to oust the application of a peremptory norm must be void. There has been considerable controversy in the international community concerning the existence, character, and effects of peremptory norms, or Jus Cogens. These difficulties clearly stem from the apparent incompatibility of the concept with the theory of consent. Such criticisms overlook the fact that peremptory norms are generally considered to emanate from a general or universal consensus among states as to their peremptory and fundamental character. In any event, the debate has shifted in recent years from the existence of such peremptory norms to their extent and content. Widely recognized examples of rules of Jus Cogens include the principle of pacta sunt servanda, the general prohibition on the unilateral use of force by states, the prohibition of international criminal acts, such as genocide, or of violations of fundamental human rights, such as torture, and the illegality of colonial domination, or alien subjugation. The International Court of Justice recognized the general prohibition of the use of force by states as a principle of Jus Cogens in its judgment in case concerning military and paramilitary activities in and against Nicaragua, 1986. A treaty containing a provision that is inconsistent with a peremptory norm will automatically be void in its entirety. Just as a treaty incompatible with a pre-existing norm of Jus Cogens is by definition invalid ab initio, so too is a treaty inconsistent with a new norm of Jus Cogens automatically terminated, by operation of law, from the moment of emergence of that new Jus Cogens norm. This follows from the very nature of a norm of Jus Cogens, which is not subject to derogation by any rule of international law other than one having the same Jus Cogens character. Jus Cogens rules represent the highest source in the informal hierarchy of sources of international law. The main difference between a rule of Jus Cogens and a rule that creates an obligation erga omnes is that all Jus Cogens rules create erga omnes obligations, while only some rules creating erga omnes obligations are rules of Jus Cogens. Further, with regard to Jus Cogens obligations, the emphasis is on their recognition by the international community as a whole, whilst with regard to obligations erga omnes the emphasis is on their nature. The latter mentioned embody moral values, which are of universal validity. They are binding because they express moral absolutes from which no state can claim an exemption, whatever its political, economic, and social organization.